The night Elena Brooks Kang signed her divorce papers, she was wearing the dress from her engagement. It was a deep burgundy wrap dress, the one Jae-min had chosen himself from a boutique in Paris 7 years ago, lifting it off the rack with that rare, unguarded smile he almost never showed in public. "This one," he had said simply, and the certainty in his voice had made her heart fold like warm paper. She had kept the dress through 3 penthouse moves, 2 company relocations, and 1 miscarriage. She had grieved mostly alone. She kept it because it represented the version of him she had fallen in love with, the version who still looked at her like she was the most important thing in any room. She was not wearing it for him tonight. She was wearing it for herself. The dining table was set with everything he loved. Galbi Jim slow-cooked since the afternoon, the broth reduced to a deep amber. Steamed rice. A bottle of Chateau Margaux 2009, the same vintage they had opened on. Their wedding night. 2 candles. 2 plates. The apartment was entirely silent except for the low hum of the refrigerator and the distant sound of Seoul traffic 32 floors below. She had been sitting at that table for 2 hours when her phone lit up with the notification. She did not look for it immediately. She poured herself a glass of wine, took 1 slow sip, and set the glass down with the quiet precision of a woman who has decided not to feel anything until she can afford to. Then she looked at the screen. The photo was already everywhere. Jae-min and Minna on the deck of a private yacht somewhere off the coast of Jeju Island. His hand was on the small of her back, possessive and easy, the same way he had once touched Elena at the Cannes Investor Gala 4 years ago, when everything was still intact. Minna's smile was wide and triumphant, catching the golden hour light like she had specifically arranged for the sun to cooperate. The caption was a single red heart, 47,000 likes in less than an hour. Elena stared at the photo for a very long time. Then she set the phone face down on the table, reached into the leather portfolio she had placed beside her chair before dinner, and uncapped her pen. She signed 3 documents. The first was the divorce filing, already prepared by her private attorney, a woman named Soo-jin, who had worked quietly on Elena's behalf for the past 4 months without a single leak. The second was the transfer of her personal shares back into a holding company registered under a name that meant nothing to anyone in Seoul. The third was a letter of intent, her biotech firm's first formal partnership with a European pharmaceutical group, a deal she had quietly negotiated for 11 months while Jae-min was busy being photographed at rooftop bars. She capped the pen, blew out the candles, and she began to eat alone. Because she had cooked a beautiful meal, and she was not going to waste it. People who watched Kang Jae-min from a distance, his board members, his competitors, the financial journalists who wrote breathless profiles about his self-made empire, often described him using the same cluster of words: brilliant, ruthless, visionary, the kind of man who could restructure a failing hospitality conglomerate in 6 months and turn it into a technology holding company worth $11 billion. The kind of man who had grown up in a 2-room apartment in Incheon and had clawed his way to the cover of Forbes Asia by the time he was 34 through sheer ferocious intelligence and an almost pathological refusal to fail. What the profiles almost never mentioned was Elena. The 2 of them had met in London at a conference on emerging market investment when he was 29 and still building. She was there representing her father's company, Brooks Global, one of the most respected private investment houses in West Africa, with significant stakes in infrastructure, energy, and healthcare across Nigeria, Ghana, and Côte d'Ivoire. She had a first-class degree in international business law from University College London and a fluency in 4 languages that she wore so lightly most people only discovered it by accident. She had not been looking for a husband. She had been looking for a good dinner and an exit from a conversation about currency hedging. They had argued instead, at a corner table, about whether emerging market volatility was structurally inevitable or a failure of institutional imagination. She had disagreed with him clearly and without apology, and he had looked at her the way a man looks at something rare that he has not seen before and does not quite know what to do with. He had pursued her for 8 months before she said yes to anything. Their early years together were genuinely good. She should not pretend they weren't. They were good in the way that something forged under pressure is good, solid, real, tested. When his hospitality venture nearly collapsed in 2018 due to a liquidity crisis, it was Elena who called in a discreet conversation with her father's network that quietly redirected $40 million in bridge financing to keep the company alive. When he was trying to break into East African markets and kept hitting cultural walls, she translated not just the language, but the entire contextual framework of how business relationships were built in those rooms, the patience required, the protocol. She sat beside him in meetings in Lagos and Accra and Nairobi and Addis Ababa and watched him learn to listen. She did not do these things to be thanked. She did them because she loved him, and because she was good at them, and because she believed, with the steady conviction of a woman who has been raised to build things, that a marriage was something you invested in. What she had not understood then, what she only came to understand slowly, the way a tide rises without you noticing until the water is at your waist, was that Jae-min had filed everything she contributed into a mental category called wife things, background functions, the soft infrastructure of his life that he noticed only when it failed. He did not think of her as a partner. He had never been taught to. He thought of her as his, in the way a man who has never had anything for a very long time can sometimes mistake possession for love and not discover the difference until it's far too late. Yu Min-ah arrived in his orbit the way certain people are designed to arrive, loudly, at exactly the right moment of vulnerability. His right moment was the company's IPO year. He was under immense pressure, stretched thin across 3 continents, sleeping 4 hours a night. Min-ah was a lifestyle influencer with 2 million followers and a talent for making powerful men feel both admired and entertained, which is a precise and underrated combination. She laughed at everything he said. She had no opinions that required his patience. She was uncomplicated in the way a vacation is uncomplicated, pleasant precisely because it asks nothing of you. Elena had noticed the shift in him before. She noticed Min-ah specifically. She noticed it in the way he stopped asking for her read on business decisions, in the way he started coming home later, and then not at all some nights, in the way he would look at her across a dinner table with a kind of restless distraction, like a man mentally reviewing his schedule while someone else is speaking. She had tried, once, to address it directly. This was about 8 months before the anniversary dinner, on a Sunday morning, when he was actually home for reasons she suspected had more to do with Min-ah's schedule than his own. She had poured them both coffee, sat across from him at the kitchen island, and said quietly, "I feel like we're disappearing. I want to talk about it." He had looked up from his phone with a brief, almost irritated surprise, the way you look when an appliance makes an unexpected noise. "We're fine, Elena. You always catastrophize." "I'm not catastrophizing. I'm telling you how I feel. You feel that way because you have too much time. Maybe you should get back to something. A project, charity work, whatever." She had been quiet for a moment. Then she said, "I've been building something, a biotech regulatory consultancy. I've been studying for it for 2 years." He had nodded without real attention, scrolling again. "Good. That's good." She had picked up her coffee and gone to her home office and closed the door, and in that closing, she had made a decision she did not yet fully understand herself, that she would build quietly, without his attention, without his support, and without waiting for him to become the man who would celebrate it with her. She would build because she was someone who built things, and when it was done, she would assess where she was standing and make her next decision from there. The company dinner was in October, 6 weeks before the anniversary. It was a formal occasion, Kang Holdings' annual appreciation gala, at a private room in one of Seoul's most prestigious hotels. Elena arrived in a structured black gown, her hair pinned up, every inch of her exactly what she had always been in these rooms, poised, elegant, fluent in 3 of the 4 languages being spoken. She had attended this dinner every year since they married. She knew most of the guests by name. Jae-min arrived late. Min-ah was not there. She was not yet brazen enough for formal company events. But her absence felt almost irrelevant, because something in the way Jae-min moved through the room had already erased Elena from its center. He greeted investors. He shook hands with executives. He laughed at the right moments and commanded the right amount of space. And when he finally reached Elena's side, he barely touched her shoulder in greeting before turning back to a conversation about quarterly projections. Later, when a board member's wife asked sincerely how Elena was spending her time these days, Jae-min answered before Elena could speak. "She stays busy," he said vaguely, and turned away. Elena smiled at the board member's wife and said she was working on something in biotech regulation, and the woman's eyes lit up with genuine interest, and they talked for 20 minutes about the regulatory landscape in emerging pharmaceutical markets, and it was the most substantive conversation Elena had at the entire event. On the drive home, the car was silent for a long time. Then Elena said, looking out the window, "You answered for me tonight." "I was just filling space. I was standing right there." He exhaled through his nose, the sound he made when he considered a conversation, an interruption. "Elena, do you still respect me?" she asked. Just that. Simply. He glanced at her, and she watched him decide in real time that the easiest answer was the most sufficient. 1. "You'll always be my wife. Don't overthink it." She looked at him for a moment. He had already returned his attention to his phone. "Okay," she said. She looked back out the window at Seoul moving past them in a blur of lights. She did not say another word the entire ride home. The headlines started in November. Korean entertainment media, then regional business outlets, then international gossip aggregators that translated the story into 6 languages with varying degrees of accuracy. Billionaire's foreign wife replaced by young influencer. Some articles included side-by-side photos, Min-ah young and vivid at 31 events, Elena photographed from older archives, with a caption that described her as reportedly keeping a low profile. Keeping a low profile. She laughed at that, alone in her office, surrounded by biotech law case files and regulatory frameworks from 5 different jurisdictions. She was keeping the lowest of profiles. She was also registered as the sole director of a company called Meridian Biotech Group, incorporated in Ireland, with a secondary operational base in Lagos. She had spent the better part of 18 months building its framework, quietly, legally, meticulously, with the help of 3 co-founders she had met through her own academic network, people who knew her work and not her husband's name. Her sister called from Lagos. A Daise. Sharp, direct, the kind of woman who could spot a structural weakness in 30 seconds, whether it was a business plan or a marriage. "Come home," Daise said. "Not yet." "Elena, the whole world is watching him embarrass you." "Let them watch," Elena said, pulling up a document on her screen. "I'm busy." "You're too proud." "I'm too busy. There's a difference." She paused. 4 months, Ada. Give me 4 months." Daise was quiet. Then, "Fine. But when you come home loudly." "I intend to." She gave him one more chance. She should not have, and she knew even while she was doing it that it was less about hope and more about a kind of fairness, a need to be certain, without any remaining doubt, that she had not left something undone on her side. The morning of their anniversary, she texted him. Just one line. "I'm making dinner tonight. Please come home." He read it. She could see the read receipt. He did not respond. She cooked anyway. Not out of delusion. but because she had decided to make herself that dinner regardless. And the ritual of it mattered to her, even if he would never understand why. He did not come home. The photo went up at 9:47 p.m. She sat at the table until 11, ate slowly, drank half the wine, and washed up the dishes with the kind of thorough, focused attention that is sometimes the only dignity available. Then she went to her desk, opened the leather portfolio, and signed the documents she had been sitting with for 4 months. The note she left on his desk was 11 words. She had written it 40 times, in draft after draft, over 6 weeks. 30-word versions, 1-page versions. Versions full of everything she had swallowed over years of dinners and silences and moments of erasure. She had deleted them all. What she finally wrote was this: "You were right. I had nowhere to go. So I built somewhere new." She was gone before his alarm went off. Her wardrobe contained only its empty hangers. Her books were gone. Her desk was bare and clean. The wedding photo was still on the shelf. She had considered this for a long time and decided to leave it, not as a wound, but because it was his history too, and she was not cruel. On the kitchen counter, there was a covered plate of leftover Galbi Jim, because she was practical, and it would keep for 2 days in the refrigerator if he moved it. And wasting food was not something she had ever been comfortable with, regardless of the circumstances. She had a first-class seat on the 6 a.m. flight to London, where she would spend 4 days finalizing the partnership agreement with the European Pharmaceutical Group before continuing to Lagos. She slept the entire flight. It was the best sleep she'd had in 2 years. Jae-min found the note at 7:15 a.m. He read it 3 times. Then he walked through the apartment in his dress shirt from the previous day, opening doors, registering the specific quality of emptiness that is different from simple absence. The kind that means a person has made a permanent decision. He checked her wardrobe. He checked her home office. The desk, bare. A slight indent in the shelf where her books had been. The faint smell of her perfume, already thinning. He stood in the middle of the room for a long time. Then he went back to his room, changed his shirt, and went to work. He told himself it was manageable. Marriages ended. He would call his lawyer. There was a company to run. Minna texted him at 9. "Good morning." He put his phone in his desk drawer and did not take it out for 3 hours. The silence was the thing nobody had warned him about. Not the silence of Elena's absence specifically. He had trained himself, in those first weeks, not to think about her specifically, which was a discipline that worked reasonably well at 11 a.m. in a boardroom. It was the other silences. The one at 7 p.m. when he came home, and no soft jazz was playing. She had always cued something, Coltrane or Fatoumata Diawara or Nina Simone, something that shifted the apartment from a workspace into a home. The silence on his desk, where she used to leave tea without announcing it, a habit she'd had since their 2nd year. He had never thanked her for it, he realized now, not once explicitly, because he had categorized it as a background function, as wife things, and background functions do not require acknowledgement. The silence, specifically, of not being known. Minna knew the version of him that was easy to know, the powerful, decisive, publicly confident man. She laughed at his jokes and deferred to his opinions and made him feel unencumbered. But there were moments now, in conversation with her, when he would reference something, a memory, a business instinct, a fear he was feeling his way around, and see the slight blankness in her eyes, not because she was stupid, but because they had no shared architecture. Elena had known his architecture from the inside. She had been present at the construction of most of it. His CFO, Park Hyun-soo, brought it up 3 months after Elena left. Carefully. Over lunch. "Some of the investors have questions," Hyun-soo said, "about continuity, leadership image. The African Partnership Network has also been..." He paused diplomatically. Quieter. "It's a divorce, not a restructuring," Jae-min said. "I understand. I just want you to know that when we trace the East African connections, Adeyemi Group, Mensa Capital, the Nairobi Infrastructure Fund, they all came in during Mrs. Kang's tenure. Her direct relationships, the introductions were hers. Jae-min looked at him. She's still connected to those groups, Hyun-soo added carefully. They have not been in contact with us since January. The lunch continued, but Jae-min did not eat much. He first heard about Meridian Biotech Group from a news alert in April, 5 months after Elena had left. He almost dismissed it. The headline was about a new biotech regulatory consultancy making an aggressive push into the African pharmaceutical market, backed by European capital and founded by someone with apparently impeccable credentials in international business law. He read the first paragraph with the mild interest of a man scanning industry news, and then he saw the founder's photo, and the sentence stopped completely in his mind. Elena Brooks, the founder. He read the article 3 times. Then he found a second article from a London trade publication that covered the European Pharmaceutical Partnership. Then a profile in a Nigerian business magazine, Arise, the full-page version, that described her background in extensive and accurate detail, including her academic credentials, her language capabilities, her deep familiarity with regulatory frameworks across 4 continents. There was a quote from a French pharmaceutical executive who described her as one of the sharpest strategic minds we've encountered in the last decade. She had been building this for years, while attending his galas and translating his negotiations and sitting quietly across from him at dinners while he scrolled his phone. She had been studying biotech law in her own office at midnight. While he had been telling her she catastrophized, she had been building a company. While he had been ignoring her anniversary texts, she had been signing partnership agreements that were now generating significant industry attention. He called his head of intelligence, discreetly, through proper channels, framing it as competitive analysis, and asked for a full briefing on Meridian Biotech Group. What came back was comprehensive and quietly devastating. The company had been incorporated 18 months ago. Its founding capital had come from 2 sources: Elena's personal holdings, which, it turned out, were more substantial than he had ever thought to inquire about, because he had never thought to inquire, and a seed investment from Brooks Global, her father's company. She had 3 co-founders, all of whom were respected figures in their respective fields. She had secured regulatory consultancy contracts with 2 regional African governments and was in advanced discussions with a third. The European Pharmaceutical Partnership was worth an estimated $40 million over 5 years. There was also a note in the briefing, almost a footnote, that made him sit back in his chair and remain very still for a long time. She had been the primary strategic architect of his early East African market entry, not supporting, not facilitating, architecting, the briefs she had prepared, the relationship frameworks she had designed, the cultural navigation she had provided. His intelligence team had traced the paper trail carefully. Without her specific contributions in that 12-month window, the East African expansion, which now represented nearly 18% of Kang Holdings' global revenue, would likely not have succeeded. He had thought he was bringing her into his world. She had been carrying him through hers. He did not call her. He wanted to, but something in him, some thin remaining thread of self-awareness, told him that a phone call was not what this moment deserved. He sat with the information for 2 months, moving through his days with a new and persistent heaviness that he could not shake and did not try to explain to Minna, who would not have understood it. He and Minna ended quietly in June. She did not take it well. She posted about it on her platform in a way that generated 3 days of gossip coverage, none of which Jae-min engaged with. He was not thinking about Minna anymore. He was thinking about the 11-word note on his desk, which he had read enough times that he no longer needed to see it to know exactly what it said. You were right. I had nowhere to go, so I built somewhere new. He saw her at the Global Investment Summit in September in Singapore. She entered the main conference hall with 2 members of her team, and the shift in the room was immediate and physical, not theatrical, not the manufactured entrance of someone performing power, but the organic gravity of a person who has become too real and too accomplished to move through rooms without affecting them. She was in dark green. Her hair was natural and worn up. She wore no jewelry except for one ring on her right hand that he did not recognize. She shook hands with people he had spent years trying to access: ministers, fund managers, executives from 3 of the largest pharmaceutical companies in Europe. They shook her hand like she was the valuable one. He watched her from across the room for a full minute before she saw him. When she did, her face did not change. That was the thing that undid him. Not anger, not pain, not even surprise. Just a brief, quiet recognition, the way you would look at a country you had once lived in and then left. Familiar, resolved, firmly in the past. He did not approach her during the conference sessions. He watched her speak on a panel about regulatory frameworks and African pharmaceutical markets, and she was precise and devastating and completely authoritative, and people in the room took notes, and he sat in the 4th row and felt the particular specific shame of a man realizing, publicly and irrevocably, exactly what he had discarded. He found her afterward, in a side corridor near the exit, when her team had stepped away briefly. "Elena." She turned, looked at him with that same composed distance. "Jae-min." He had prepared nothing. Every version he had rehearsed in his head dissolved the moment she was actually in front of him, because she was real and complete, in a way that made his prepared words feel insufficient. "You look well," he said, which was true, and also the most useless thing he could have said. "I am well," she replied simply. Silence. He looked at her, and she did not look away, and he understood in that moment that she was not uncomfortable. She was simply waiting. She had nothing to defend, nothing to hide, nothing to explain. He was the one who had things to say. "I read about Meridian," he said. "I've been following it since April." "I know. My team flagged the competitive intelligence request." Something moved through him. Surprise, then a flash of something almost like admiration. "Of course they did." She said nothing. He looked at the floor briefly, then back at her. "I was arrogant," he said. "I thought you'd never leave. I'm not sure what I thought. Maybe that you were permanent. Like a fixture. And I didn't." He stopped. "I didn't see you. I had you right there, and I didn't see you, and I'm—" Another stop. "I'm sorry, Elena. I am genuinely sorry." She watched him say it. When he finished, she was quiet for a moment. "You didn't lose me because you cheated," she said finally. Her voice was even and clear. "You lost me because you believed I would endure it forever, because you had decided that I had no alternative to you, that I needed you more than you needed me. I know that now." "I know you know it now," she said. "That's not the same as knowing it when it mattered." He nodded. "You were my husband," she said. "I would have stayed. I wanted to stay. All I needed was for you to actually see me, just to look up once and see what I was contributing, what I was building beside you. That's all I needed." Her voice remained steady. It was the stillness of something that has already run its full course of pain and come out the other side. "You couldn't do that. And that's a grief I've already passed through. I'm not angry at you anymore, Jae-min. I want you to know that. I'm genuinely not." He believed her. That was almost the worst part. "Can we—" He stopped, started again. "Is there any version where we—" "No," she said, quietly, not cruelly. "I could be different. I understand things now that I—" "You lost me because you believed I would endure it forever," she repeated. And then, "I already started over. I'm not going back," he said. "Can we at least—" "Jae-min." Her voice was very gentle. "Can we at least is how every conversation between us would go now. Can we, at least? Just a little. Just to try. And I care about myself too much for that now. She picked up her bag from where it rested against the wall. I hope you build something real, she said. For yourself, not the company. Something real. I genuinely hope that for you. She said it the way a person means, something completely. Then she walked away, back toward the main hall, and he watched her. And this time, unlike every other time in their marriage, when he could have stopped something from leaving and chose not to, he understood why he couldn't follow, because she had already arrived, fully, at a place he couldn't reach by simply showing up. The years that followed were not unkind to him. He would not have deserved kindness, but life rarely distributes what is deserved. Kang Holdings continued to grow. He became more careful in his leadership, more present, more rigorous about the human architecture of the company, in ways that his senior team noticed and credited to maturity. He worked differently. He listened differently. He did not fall into another relationship for almost 3 years, not because he was pining, though there were nights when the apartment was very quiet, and he felt the specific weight of irreversible things, but because he had finally become interested in understanding himself, and that required more space than he had ever previously allocated. He kept their wedding photo, not in a public place, in his private study, on a shelf beside books. He kept it because it was true, because it documented something real that had existed, whatever he had done to destroy it, and because he had decided that editing out the parts of your history you regret is a luxury that does not actually help you become better. He was interviewed by a financial journalist in the 3rd year, young woman, very sharp, who at the end of a long conversation about corporate strategy asked if there were any decisions he would revise. He thought about it. Never assume someone strong will stay just because they can, he said. She wrote it down and then looked up. Personal or professional? Both, he said. Elena's Lagos office had floor-to-ceiling glass facing the Atlantic. She had chosen the location herself, the floor, the orientation, everything, because she had spent enough years in Seoul penthouses with views of other buildings, and she wanted, for the first time in a long time, to be able to see the horizon. When she was thinking through problems, she liked to stand at that glass and watch the ocean, which remained reliably itself, regardless of what was happening in any particular boardroom on any particular Tuesday. Meridian Biotech Group was, by its 4th year, operating in 7 African countries and advising 4 European pharmaceutical companies on continental market entry. She had 43 employees. She had been featured on the cover of Forbes Africa. She was, increasingly, the person that other people called when the problem was too complex for the standard playbook. She was also, for the first time since she was 26 years old, exactly herself, without modification, without the quiet diminishment of being perpetually secondary in her own story. She had not stopped believing in love. She wanted to be precise about this because people sometimes assumed, incorrectly, that women who leave without screaming have closed something off permanently. She had not. She had merely recalibrated, removed the version of love that required her to make herself smaller to sustain, and remained open to a version that could hold her actual size. She was in no hurry. She had built somewhere new. She had time. If you are still watching this, then you already know. This was never just a story about a marriage. It was a story about what we take for granted until it is completely gone, and about the quiet, devastating power of a woman who decides to invest in herself instead of waiting to be valued. Elena didn't leave to punish him. She left because she finally chose herself. And that is the kind of choice that changes everything. If this story stayed with you, if it made you feel something, let us know in the comments what hit you hardest. Was it the anniversary scene? The investment summit? That final conversation? And if you know someone who needs to hear a story like this right now, share it with them. Subscribe so you never miss the next one. New stories every week. We'll see you there.